a future joint work on promoting the whole complex of Russia and Tajikistan ties. They will discuss the schedule of the interstate dialogue in the upcoming year. They will have a detailed, substantial exchange of opinions on key issues of bilateral agenda, with a special attention paid to the reinforcement of cooperation in the issues of security and defense, as well as humanitarian and migrational areas. They will discuss regional topical issues of the global agenda in order to deepen the coordination between Moscow and Dushanbe, as well as on the multilateral platforms as the UN, CIS, CSTO, and SCO. During the visit, they will sign a range of bilateral documents, including the Program of Cooperation between our Ministers of Foreign Affairs for 2025-2026. One date from the schedule of the minister, I saved it for last, and here I mean the February the 10th, our professional holiday, the Diplomat's Day, which was established by the President on the 31st of October. And of course, we will all congratulate each other on this day. And of course, for this day, this is a working day. For all of those who work in the central office of the ministry, we have a lot of events planned for this day. But allow me to recall the history. February the 10th of 1549, this day is connected with the earliest documented mention of the ambassadorial decree, which was the first state department which took care of foreign affairs. Of course, we shortened the name to the Diplomat's Day, but it's actually the holiday of all those who work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who work in diplomatic missions, in our regional missions. And this day is dedicated to preserving traditions of the diplomatic service. And this is the symbol of our unity, of our actions. And this is a perfect occasion to share information about the achievements, both historic and diplomatic, of our country during the difficult situation nowadays. Diplomats are carrying extra responsibility to defend the interests of Russia on the foreign perimeter or in the foreign affairs, which we hear more often. And this is a responsibility that is held. Of course, the diplomatic service is part of the state service. But this responsibility is also connected to the hopes and aspirations of people who not only put their responsibility onto the diplomats, but also their hope and aspirations that the current crisis will be overcome, but also that these expectations connected with the work of diplomats will be fulfilled. And as you know, we always do everything we can and everything possible in order to ensure security of our country, to enlarge mutually beneficial cooperation with the states of Eurasia, Africa, and Latin America. And we're doing everything we can so that the planet can withstand the pressure from different regimes, political spheres of madness. As per tradition, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in both our embassies, there will be a lot of celebratory events. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation will hold a number of events with participation of the minister. On the morning of February the 10th, the ministry will hold the wreath ceremony next to the plaques of the diplomats who paid with their lives both during the Great Patriotic War. We will lay the flowers to the monument of Yevgeny Primakov, which is located on the square in front of the ministry. We'll attend the Novodevichy Cemetery, and in the foyer there will be an exhibition dedicated to the 80 years since the opening of the Yalta Conference, which took place in 1945. we spoke about this at length, about this historical event, and about the importance of the decision that we're taking during this conference during our last briefing, and also this appeared in many documents, interviews, and materials of Russian ambassadors, Russian diplomats, and the key spot should be dedicated to the article of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, who published this article just ahead of this historical event. And in the afternoon, during the ceremonial gathering, the minister will address his colleagues, and there is a special section on our website which is traditionally dedicated to the Diplomat's Day ahead of the professional holiday. We publish different interviews, articles of our ambassadors, permanent representatives, general consulates. And ahead of the Diplomat's Day, we traditionally publish a lot of materials dedicated to our history, to the history of diplomatic service, and to keys and goals that we set for ourselves and how they're being implemented. And in order to honor the memory, there will be a hashtag that collects the most relevant events. Traditionally, under this hashtag, we pay honors to the memories of everyone who served our country. We remember them with gratitude, and all these materials can be found on our accounts and social media under the hashtag Diplomat's Day or the DDR 2025. We will share all this information in the text of today's briefing, so please follow our social media and the timeline of news that we're posting there. And in the context of honoring the memories of those who have, I have to mention that unfortunately today we found out that today we've lost the first deputy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Vladimir Titov, who held this position since 2013 to 2024. Just recently, perhaps within the last hour, we've posted the necrologue, and his memory will stay in the hearts of his colleagues and friends, and we express sincere condolences to his family and friends. And now for the relevant international agenda. Of course, we start with the situation around Ukraine. Ukrainian militants continue to terrorize the civilian population and civilian infrastructure of Russian regions. On January 29th, 30th, the Ukrainian armed forces have fired more than 30 shells, including cluster munitions. They targeted a dormitory quarter of Kremenaya, the LPR. 2 people were injured. Residential houses and social facilities were destroyed on January 31st, from January 31st to February 3rd. Massive shelling and drone attacks were launched against Gorlovka. 30 people were wounded, 2 hospitals, an oncology dispensary, as well as a maternal and child welfare center were damaged. The Benderites do not stop hunting civilians in Kursk region, including with the help of UAVs. On January 30th, 2 civilians were wounded when a shell hit a residential house in the village of Voronok in Rilsky district. On January 31st, in the village of Snagost, Kornevsky district, an enemy drone hit a civilian vehicle. 2 people were killed and 1 wounded. On the same day, in the liberated village of Nikolaeva Daryina, Suzhin district, a drone wounded 3 local residents when Russian servicemen were taking them out of a cellar where they tried to hide from Ukraine Nazis. On January 29th, in Belgorod region, in the village of Razumne, after a drone hit a residential house, a woman and her 2-year-old child were killed. From January 31st to February 3rd, as a result of a UAV attack by the Ukrainian armed forces on civilian vehicles, as well as the settlements in the region. As a result of this attack, 2 civilians were killed and 12 people were wounded. On January 31st, on the Vasilievska-Tomak highway in Zaporozhye region, a Ukrainian drone attacked a civilian car, and a local resident died of his wounds. On February the 4th, in Vasilyevka municipality of the same region, the Banderites used a drone to attack a school bus carrying 20 minors and their chaperone. Five children and the driver were injured. Is this really the first case when the Ukrainian armed forces deliberately target children? Of course not. Far from it. And this is not a singular case amongst many. This is a tactic, and this is a strategy that is at the basis of their actions. Because this is what the Kyiv regime's politics was counting on, to do anything so that there are no more people who did not bend the knee to the Ukrainian Nazis, to the band who continue to destroy the motherland of Ukrainians in order to scare them off, in order to hit exactly where it hurts, to target their children. The Kyiv regime chose this method specifically. There's nothing human, not even holy, just human, exists for the Kyiv regime and its bloody executioners. And I would like to remind you that everything, and Zelensky admitted to it just recently, all of this is possible only thanks to the support from the West, thanks to the financial pumping and the supply of arms coming in daily. But every crime is followed by the punishment. Russian courts continue to sentence Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries for war crimes. Russian investigative committee has chosen preventive measures for Ukrainian armed forces fighters, Fabrisenko and Parafilo, who committed atrocities towards civilians in the village of Ruskaya Porechnya in Kursk region. Those are not even crimes. Yes, this is the official qualification, the crime, with violation of the law. And why are the lawyers saying that? They should closely follow the letter and the spirit of the law. They have no right to take a step to the right or to the left from the letter and the spirit of the law. But if we use the words who describe not only the legal side of these crimes, but if we mention the basis, these are the atrocities. The defendants pleaded guilty. Lithuanian mercenary Remus Armaitis was sentenced in absentia to 12.5 years of imprisonment, while Georgian so-called legionnaire Georgi Gelashvili was sentenced to 14 years. All those convicted are on an international wanted list. The criminal cases of the British mercenary James Scott, who was taken prisoner, and the wanted Georgian mercenaries Mikhail Gognadze, Gelahor Sevanidze, and Guguri Baramidze have been sent to court. For the attack on the Russian embassy in Kyiv on March 10, 2016, a citizen of Ukraine, Irma Krat, was sentenced in absentia for 7 years in prison. Back in the day, I'd like to remind you, she, together with two unidentified persons, threw 6 Molotov cocktails on the territory of our diplomatic mission. The law enforcement agencies of Russia will continue to work to bring Ukrainian Nazis and foreign mercenaries to justice for war and other crimes. And as for the Western assistance that serves as the substance feeding the terrorist Kyiv regime, Western countries are trying to prevent the cessation of hostilities in Ukraine. In other words, they're doing everything in order to continue killings of civilians. On February the 1st, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte lamented in an interview with Bild that, direct quote, "the front is moving in the wrong direction." I believe that the NATO Secretary General, it's a word that speaks for itself, who urged Europeans to increase defense spending to make sure, as he said, Russia does not achieve its goals. Can you believe it? According to him, the front is moving in the wrong direction. On February the 3rd, French President Emmanuel Macron promised to double the country's defense budget. On January 31st, Ukrainian Prime Minister Senegal announced that under the agreement on so-called 100-year partnership with the UK, Kyiv expects to receive £2.5 billion from London for the purchase of air defense systems and the creation of repair bases for Western military equipment in the country. I have two amendments to his statement. Why the 100-year partnership agreement was reached with the UK. I listened to the statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the United Kingdom, if we can use this word in this case, and found out that apparently, as was stated by the British side, a direct quote, the British-Ukrainian partnership goes back thousands of years. So that's what they should have called it. To count the future by thousands of years. Why being so modest and calling a 100-year partnership? It's an atrocious, and not even a mistake or an incorrectly expressed thought. It's just an atrocity of thought based on total lack of knowledge of history, not only of Ukraine, but now I'm sure that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the UK doesn't even know the history of their own country. If they know that their relationship has been built over thousands of years, according to him. And the Second Amendment to what he has been discussing, London is planning to hand over to the Kyiv regime £2.5 billion. You see, based on what we've witnessed in 2020, the healthcare system in the UK, maybe even if it does exist, it's only available for those with great opportunities. And the rest of them, who represent the majority of the UK, have to provide healthcare services by themselves because they're either unavailable or they don't even exist as a whole. This is the healthcare systems. Do you remember how they were treated on the phone from COVID? When they called, said that they had a fever of 40 degrees, they were unable to breathe, they had no medication, and they could either not leave their houses or they were prohibited, and they were instructed over the phone, and the rest you can remember. Perhaps these £2.5 billion for London should be spent on the development of their own healthcare system. Just recently, the whole world watched in horror as Los Angeles went up in flames, as California went up in flames. And it goes up in flames every year, but this year it fully burned down. And it did not spare a single soul, no matter if they were rich or poor. And it only demonstrated to the whole world that a state in the United States, an entire state, was not prepared to extinguish the fires, to preventive measures. It seemed that the money for extinguishing the fires, especially through official American structures, were not transferred to the states in need, but to the Kyiv regime, including in order to the needs of fire extinguishment.
Штат США. Вот у меня вопрос к Британии. 2,5 миллиарда фунтов стерлингов. Какое количество британцев мечтали бы быть причастными к этим деньгам просто для того, чтобы элементарно поправить свое здоровье? Зачем же вы, Downing Street Foreign Office, отправляете эти деньги не на лечение своих людей, а на смерть чужих? Тоже просто бизнес. Вот на днях Швеция анонсировала выделение рекордного транша помощи ВСУ на сумму $1,2 миллиарда. Тоже, видимо, социальных вопросов нет и проблем в Швеции, а все же знают, что есть. При этом неконтролируемая накачка Украины оружием способствует росту, и они же тоже об этом не думают, контрабанды вооружений за пределы Украины. Сколько можно об этом говорить?
What is interesting, the Ukrainian media multiple times noted the aspiration of their compatriots and foreign dealers to profit by armed supplies to the FU. In 2024, more than 6,000 items of armaments missiles were detected and recovered. mostly firearms and anti-tank missiles. Two citizens of Norway are also accused in arms trafficking, but they have whole bans to do so. Last year, more than 2.2 million items of munitions were confiscated last year. Just think about it. How can we not see things that are so clear? These arms go to black markets and then they go back to Europe. Trafficking of explosives thrives. In 2024, more than 7.2 tons of explosives was recovered, mostly as explosive for anti-tank mines or for artillery shells. The main source for arms in the black markets is, as it is easy to guess, the Ukrainian fighters. How do they do that, and who are they? They are those people who, for some reasons, ended up in the administrative area. Mostly they are deserters or people who went AWOL for various reasons. Sometimes they just want to survive. Some of them are just a chain in this a part of a longer chain. Now about the financing of Ukraine. The U.S. State Secretary Marco Rubio, during his interview to an American journalist Megyn Kelly on January 31st, admitted, I quote, "The dishonesty that has existed is that we somehow led people to believe that Ukraine would be able not just to defeat Russia, but destroy them, push them all the way back to what the world looked like in 2012 or 2014. They've been asking for the last year and a half is to find a stalemate, State Secretary, a protracted stalemate. Ukraine is being set back 100 years. The president's point of view is this a protracted conflict and it needs to end. I just want to add one thing. The current state secretaries talked not about some abstract political figures. He talked about the previous officials, about those who for several years before that, and for many years before that, ruled not only the situation around Ukraine, they provoked it. They created conditions and prerequisites to start it. Zelensky, in his turn, given the situation, started to rant about the format of potential negotiations with Russia. And I'll remind you, he prohibited himself to have them by law in September 2022. Now he insists on the following scenario. Ukraine should join NATO, and this is the cheapest security guarantee for Ukraine. Do you remember his words? He needs nuclear weapons. This is some kind of absurd. And American journalists write about it. And in the conversation with the journalist from Associated Press, Zelensky directly confirmed the characteristic of being a fraud. He directly said, I quote, Ukraine received only $75 billion out of $177 billion that the US promised. When they say, Zelensky said, that Ukraine received $200 billion to support the Ukrainian armed forces, it's all not true. I'm unaware where the money is, end of quote. So this begs the question, how much money the Biden administration sent to the Ukrainian regime? How much money Bankova received? how much money went from Bankova and where. Somebody has to be brave and count all this money. I remember how about a year ago, when even under the Biden administration, many realized that they were involved in a terrible corruption scheme. There was a check in the executive power in the US, some kind of an audit to find out how much and what assistance exactly, humanitarian, financial, was sent to Ukraine. I had a feeling that it ended with nothing. I remember European commissars who went to Kiev to find out where the assistance was, and to agree what the Ukrainian side has to say. But this only proved that there was no audit, and it is just a global corruption scheme that was implemented, worked out, and then implemented by the American ultra-liberals. We took note of the recently appeared in the media of words of Samantha Power, the director of the USAID director. She was the permanent representative of the US to the UN. She walked the UN corridors, as they said, and listened to the punk group that made stunts in Russia. And this agency, USAID, this was the agency that interfered into the into internal affairs of independent states. And in 2023, Samantha Power publicly boasted that she sent $15 billion to the Kiev regime. But why did she boast? By how much money she sent? She especially underlined, and I'm talking to those who do not know that, she especially underlined that she and her agency, USAID, sent in 2023 to the Kiev regime $15 billion in cash. These are the words of the representatives of a country, of the US, where when a person takes $100 from his pocket, he is being looked strangely by other people in the shop, and the guards are being called to ask why this person was paying in cash, because mostly people pay by cards. And a person that represents a very top official in the USA publicly underlines that $15 billion was sent to the Kiev regime in cash. What does this mean? This is a one-way ticket. This money cannot be tracked or counted. No one knows where and when this money was spent. Even more, I remember that under the Biden administration, one of little requirements to the Zelensky regime from the US that allowed Zelensky to do everything he wanted. The only demand was some kind of an attempt, only an attempt to fight total corruption. Probably the fight against corruption was the cause they spent this money. Scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. I remember these words. And it is clear where this money go and who receive these flows of finance aid from the West. Now about the developments those who did not want to think now suddenly start to see things clearly. The situation in the Ukrainian army is getting truly critical and sad. Negative trends, strengthening morale, false desertment rises. The leader of the Pirogov Volunteer Mobile Hospital, Gennady Drzenko, said, I quote, one more time, it is the other side. We, he said, the Ukrainian representative, every 6th or 7th died. The 6th or 7th, it means 60 to 70%. Only at the end of 2024, Ukraine saw more than 114,000 cases of people going AWOL. The critical lack of personnel is mentioned by the Guardian as well. The treatment of the commanders towards the soldiers is illustrate very well the words of an American mercenary. He said the following, it was meant for the grinder and the better officer just sent whoever he could get. This is a very sobering commentary. The CNN report more casualties among Americans and foreign mercenaries. According to CNN, 20 U.S. citizens are considered to be missed in action. Bodies of at least 5 Americans weren't evacuated from the battlefield. Experts say that more killed and missed in action, the so-called wild geese, that's how foreign mercenaries are called, is caused by the fact that they are sent to the most difficult parts of the front line where military experience is needed. Now we know how the Ukrainian citizens are sent to the front line. Earlier, the units where foreigners served were in reserve. We knew that they were used selectively. Now in the Kursk region, they are the most part of the Ukrainian forces. The concentration in the Kursk border area is the highest. There were a lot of questions about demands of the US President Trump about rare earths that he put forward before Zelensky. According to the press service of the White House on February the 3rd, Donald Trump announced huge progress in Russia-Ukraine issue. However, he did not specify what he meant. Earlier, he also made another statement. I tell you the direct quote. We tell Ukraine that they have rare earths and we need guarantees. Trump said, demand guarantees on rare earths in any deal with Ukraine. I want Ukraine, in exchange of what we give to them, to give us rare earths. End of quote. All things considered, the US president took into account the readiness of Kyiv to sell Ukraine by hammer to keep military and finance support by the US. He approached the conflict from the commercial point of view. The similar idea was expressed by Zelensky in the so-called victory plan in October 2024, he proposed partners to make a deal with Ukraine about joint defense of critical resources of Ukraine, joint investment, and exploitation of Ukraine's economic potential, end of quote. What does this mean when we talk about the critical resources of the country? Rare earths, exactly, including uranium, titanium, lithium, and others. On February 4th, Zelensky hurried to persuade Washington that they are ready to do this together, and he thanked the U.S. for their support. What Trump said resembles not only a deal, but rather an order. And Ukraine worked off this order. Americans wanted the natural resources of Ukraine. They saw them long ago, and now, without serious effort, they managed to appropriate agriculture. Now, those who sponsor the Kiev regime. Look what remained there. Now they came for the resources. Something similar happened in history. During the World War II, when the former Soviet Ukraine was occupied, Nazis started to loot the Republican agriculture. Do you remember how they took cattle and black soil from the territory of Ukraine to Germany? We talked about it many times. And now all of this happens without any force, because the Kiev regime is prepared to do it voluntarily. We understand that because of that, and because the statehood is destroyed, Ukraine is not going to do anything together with anybody. All of this was proposed simply to be taken, so that the people in Bankova retain their power. All this hype resembles a white noise. We want to ask them, what belongs to Ukraine out of all these things? What is controlled by the Kiev regime, and what is not their territory anymore? But why should we do that? So that those who, including in Washington, who think and approach this issue from the commercial point of view, so that they understand that Zelensky doesn't have what he offers. But there's also war against monuments. Ukrainian Nazis are triggered by the monuments that still remained in Ukraine. They associate them with Russia. But who guards the historic memory? Who defends the memory of the heroes of the Great Patriotic War and World War II? Of course, Russia and its citizens. This time, Ukrainian Nazis desecrated the memorial in honor of outstanding Russian figures, to the poets of Alexander Pushkin, to painter Mikhail Vruble, mathematician Alexander Lipunov, and physiologist Ivan Sechenov. These monuments weren't tolerated. On January 27, the Kiev demolished a memorial to an outstanding Russian and Soviet physiologist, Nobel Prize winner Ivan Pavlov. they had to explain their decision somehow, and Kiev said, I quote, despite the Pavlov's contribution to science, his figure is linked to the imperial narrative, as he said. I'll remind you to those people who know nothing when they tell that UK-Ukrainian partnership dates back thousands of years. So Ivan Pavlov is a world-renowned scientist. He was recognized as the oldest physiologist in the world. There's no figure that can be compared to him in Ukraine now, and what they did to his monument testifies to total lack of trained reflexes of those who lead the authorities in Kiev. They don't have a soul. They even don't have reflexes. You know, the absurdity of the situation is this. They demolished the monument to Pavlov, but his scientific contribution remained. And future generations will use his contribution. His works are in demand. But what are they going to do in the future? Are they going to rename Pavlov? Are they going to omit his name? The one who talked about reflexes? Do you know how this can be called? One way or another. Such things are commonplace. This is a motto of the Kiev regime. These facts and many of those that we're going to talk about today reconfirms the relevance of the special military operation to denazify, demilitarize Ukraine and to remove threats coming from its territory. All of these aims will be achieved.
And by the way, speaking about love and hate towards the Iranian citizens, from the information point of view, it has become like an information bomb. I'm talking about the publication on the official website of the Finnish Foreign Ministry for volunteers who plan to go to Ukraine, and this piece of information was published for the Finnish citizens. We noticed that this information was published on February 3rd, and I quote, that this information is for those planning or considering traveling to Ukraine to serve as volunteer fighters and for their family and friends. So it's clear. But yet they're still publishing it. I won't be surprised if several persons got fired after the incident that took place there. In that materials, the Finnish Foreign Ministry has made a reservation that the Finnish Foreign Ministry does not recommend or promote volunteering as a fighter. But at the same time, it provides the Finnish society the steps that should be taken to do so in the right way. It's like as if they publish a guide how to commit a suicide, and they will write a reservation that, well, suicide is a bad thing to do, but if you want to commit a suicide, here is an instruction for you with the following steps. It's not our problem. Questions should be posed to them. How are they going to live with that? This document, well, I cannot even call it a document. It is just a mere paper that provides detailed information for Finnish mercenaries. It provides information what sources should be used to get information, what Finnish legislation says about such voyages, and they just remind us, just in case, that the war has its own rules. This instruction also provides information on how to sign a contract with the Ukrainian armed forces and opportunities to acquire military equipment and how to get medical treatment if soldiers are wounded. It's quite a detailed guide for the Finnish citizens how to die. I'm quite sure that materials will be published, and I'm sure that the diplomats at the Finnish Foreign Ministry will say that they won't do that. The Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb has repeatedly said and stated his intent to support Ukraine as long as it's necessary, and that he appreciates that the decisions of all those to go to Ukraine as volunteers. It was just a political put-up job that was sent to the Finnish Foreign Ministry from the higher-ups. And it shows the extreme state of Russophobic obsession of the Finnish officials, including its diplomatic service. They provoke their own citizens to go for dangerous and criminal schemes. Just remember what George Bush Jr. said when he was speaking with the representatives of the Kiev regime. It was his video, his words. He stated that American political elites have high hopes for the Kiev regime because the task of the Kiev regime is to kill as many Russians as possible. Well, Finland has decided to go further. If American elites are saying that the task of the Kiev regime to kill as many Russians as possible, they mean that they need to kill as many Ukrainians as possible because the war is being waged until the last Ukrainian. Well, the Finland has decided to sit out here as well because the task is quite clear, which is to kill as many Finnish citizens as possible because they have this instruction on the official website. We would like to note that we are aware of the involvement of foreign, including Finnish mercenaries in military activities in Ukraine on the side of the Kiev neo-Nazi regime, and we don't envy their fate. All those who plan to try to cause damage to our country during the special military operation, we would strongly recommend to read the very document of the Finnish Foreign Ministry that I've been talking about all this time. It is a quote from their document. Please figure out all your problems and issues on your homeland in Finland in case if you will get home later or if you won't go back at all. That clause should be carefully read and should be learned by heart. And another use of hatred. The International Ice Hockey Federation has made a decision not to admit the Russian national team to take part in the World Championship 2026. And now they're explaining their decision with their inability and the lack of possibility to guarantee the safety of the Russian team during the upcoming tournament, given the special military operation. We believe that it's just an attempt to get rid of fair competition and to deprive the audience of enjoying the game played by one of the best hockey teams in the world. What does it mean they cannot ensure the safety of the Russian team? If you can't do that, then don't organize a tournament. Don't organize anything. It's your responsibility. Safety is a responsibility. It's not an option. And if you cannot deal with that, then you should not be an organizer of world championships. There are countries who are unable to ensure the logistics, who are unable to provide comfortable conditions for the game, or they cannot guarantee the proper accommodation for audience, and they are not doing that. Well, and that fact is being checked by different commissions that have sports officials and who are trying to make a decision, like, for example, that the tournament should be moved to another part of the world, to another country. We understand that these are just mere excuses, and I would like to underscore that, and as it was repeatedly been stated at many levels, that Russia is able to ensure its own security and the safety of its own people. And that's what we are doing in the special military operation in its part. As for the World Championship, our athletes are ready and they are not afraid of taking part in international tournaments. And what they are doing is hypocrisy and cowardice. It's a violation of all principles of international sports movement. And we wish the International Ice Hockey Federation to get their courage up and to admit that the attempts to cancel the Russian sports will fail. We will continue to consistently advocate the development of international sports cooperation, the basis of principles of equality and non-discrimination, and to ensure an equal access to sports competitions for everyone with no exception. It reminds me of segregation in the Western countries when people with different colors of their skin were banned from visiting educational facilities because their safety was not guaranteed. Well, they should have probably admit their monstrous nature, because it means that those who are supporting are dangerous, and you cannot ensure the safety of participants. Germany will soon hold parliamentary elections on February 23rd. Well, these are all coincidence, and we shouldn't be accused of the elections and how they're being organized. The elections had to be called after the collapse of the Olaf Scholz coalition government in November 2024, and political parties that were part of the coalition government failed to agree on the principled issues of the German domestic and foreign policy, including the issue on how to fund the substantive costs of Berlin and the support of the Kiev regime. And it's quite telling that right after the collapse of the German government, the Federal Minister of Home Affairs of Germany, Nancy Faeser, has quickly made a preposterous statement on the imminent Russian interference in the German parliamentary elections, while she believes that we have nothing to do. Why has she said that? Well, her objective was clear. Her remarks launched another campaign to intimidate the electorate with the imaginary Russian threat. And as the day of elections approaches, this campaign is becoming more and more powerful in Germany. The security services of Germany are eagerly reporting about the establishment of the special interagency groups and commissions. They are preparing to protect their country from the ubiquitous Moscow hackers, internet trolls, bots, and influence agents. It is natural that the necessary funds and budgets are being allocated for these purposes. They can write whatever they want, that they neutralized 15 quadrillions of bots, that they have suspended their activities of 2.5 trillions of someone, something, well, any word. They can write down any word, trolls, like whatever, because information cannot be checked, you know. There is a phrase, it is difficult to look for a black cat in a dark room if a black cat isn't there, but when substantive amount of money is being allocated for that, why not? The largest companies have left Germany. The largest German companies have left Germany. Well, they have nothing to do but to look for Russian hackers. By propagating this anti-Russian myth, the German authorities turning a blind eye to the attempts to influence their electoral race. Just look how the United States don't even conceal their attempts to interfere into their elections. Well, I believe that's the German hobby, not to see the obvious thing. So if they believe that Americans have liberated Europe from the Nazis, Germany, they are saying that Germany was invaded by Nazis that came from somewhere from the east, and then the Americans came from the west and liberated Germany from the Nazis. That's what we have been hearing from them all this time. We have learned from certain Western media information that some EU countries seek to include restrictions on the freedom of movement and period of stay of Russian diplomats in the next package of anti-Russian sanctions. We have no doubt about the accuracy of this information that is reflected in some articles, and we have a serious attitude towards them, and we guarantee if such measures are taken, we will immediately take measures against diplomats of EU countries and the Russian Federation, and these restrictions will be proportionate. And these actions will be taken if measures will be taken against the Russian diplomats working in EU countries. The French internet sphere and blogs are actively writing about the fact that Russia has expelled a French correspondent of Le Monde media outlet. No, this journalist wasn't expelled without any reason. Well, probably something went wrong, but it's not true. It's not the case. A journalist of Komsomolskaya Pravda, an international journalist, had all the necessary documents, and he was going to go to France to work there, and France denied him an opportunity to work in France as an international correspondent. His visa was denied, and they stated if we warned that if discriminatory action will be taken against journalists, we'll take the same actions against French journalists that are working freely in our countries. There are a lot of actually French journalists working in our countries that they have visas and accreditations. They are present at many information events. No measures, discriminatory measures are taken against them. And we have appealed so many times to the French embassy in Moscow with an offer to not make journalists hostages to the Russophobic policy. We have appealed through the Russian embassy in Paris to the French foreign ministry. We had negotiations and talks with the French diplomats, and we've sent all the relevant notes with a view to find some mutually acceptable solution to that. And we warned that the responsive relevant measures will be taken with regard to the French journalists if they will ask for a visa. There wasn't any political context in our decision. It was just this decision was taken from the logical point of view. The French authorities have escalated the situation. They haven't issued a visa, despite the numerous requests of the Russian side to the journalist of the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper. And we have been trying to solve this issue for months. All these talks and negotiations have been going on for months, and all our attempts to address the situation after it had become obvious that the situation cannot be solved, we have taken measures against the Le Monde journalist who was next to receive the Russian visa, and we have taken the responsive measures with regard to the French journalist. So I'm just following up on the topic. If measures are taken against Russian journalists, the same proportionate actions will be taken against diplomats working in our country. We have received a lot of questions due to the shocking information that has emerged with regard to the United States Agency for International Agency. I have no idea how this agency is going to be called in the future, because in the past it was known as USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, and well, it should be called as an agency for interference in domestic affairs of other states. That's how it should be called, taking into account what this agency has been really doing all this time. Russia has been talking a lot about this agency, and I remember that in 2012 this agency was expelled from our country, and we have made a detailed commentary on that, because their activities had nothing to do with the real operations that they have been carrying out in our country. But our commentary doesn't reflect what this agency has actually been doing all this time all over the globe. This information about the agency emerges every day. We receive so many facts about it. It's a state agency which positioned itself for the past 20 years as a soft power agency.
And now it turns out that the Americans themselves want to not just use the light power, but something much more powerful towards this very same agency. So when the aid was frozen by the key operators, the USAID, as well as the issues that came to light during the audit of the actions of this, and it seems that the taxpayers' money were not allocated to the projects in the humanitarian aid direction, which was stated initially. But actually, all this money, those were hundreds of millions, were allocated towards the initiatives not of questionable character. For example, to stage a transgender opera in Colombia, or to provide organs for different people, and those were also reproductive organs. But it seems, and it appears right now, the world found out, as it's been discussed even abroad, that the USAID directly sponsored the so-called Velvet Revolutions and the coup d'etat in the countries of the post-Soviet space, in Georgia and Kyrgyzia, in Ukraine, and they used funds and grants of non-governmental organizations. They infiltrated and influenced the economies and governments of many countries of the world. We've talked about it over the years, and as a response, we've only heard that this is not true, this is Russian propaganda. But apparently, Russian propaganda is spreading the truth. Everything turned out to be true. American taxpayers paid out of their pocket the destruction of the Ukrainian statehood. They sponsored the coming to power of the Nazi clique of Turchinov, of Poroshenko, and now Zelensky. And now, even if the state servicemen, of course, they lied to the U.S. Congress, trying to convince that the Banderites are so-called Democrats or the democratic powers, then explaining the USAID support of Al-Qaeda only in the years following the 9/11 attack in New York and Manhattan at the same time where American soldiers died at the hands of Al-Qaeda is impossible. But it is a fact. And this part was quite a revelation to me. Right now, the ongoing investigation of the whole administrative operation is open to a foreign leadership. And during this transformation of this corrupted that has sunk deep in the opposite ideas and narratives of this organ, but it's actually a key element of America's interference in the internal affairs of other countries. We operate based on the fact that this structure should not have been created, not when it comes to both international principles but also moral principles of the humanity as a whole. We continue to witness this insane process, which is nothing but the revelation of the truth of what the agency truly tackled. And of course, as a shock to everyone, came the information that the USAID sponsored through grants the mass media, demanding that they conduct a policy of strategic silence when it comes to the issues that are not of particular interest for the White House, that are uncomfortable for the White House. When it comes to the issues that should have made someone believe in something, everyone was trying to shed a light on them. But other, more important topical issues, especially for the American society, for American taxpayers, for American citizens, were being conveniently left out in American mass media. Just one example, situation in Bucha, which is nothing but a stage situation. And even international organizations admitted it, but they're staying silent on it. This situation was total sensation. It didn't leave the articles. And it was discussed in America, in NATO, and in other countries. And of course, it rang in other countries as well, only to blame Russia for something we've never done. And let's take a look at Rusko-Porechna. Footage, photographs, dead bodies, medical experts, analysis, and not just using sources, but direct, honest interviews taken through tears with medical experts who we should give them their flowers for their courage, for speaking of what they've seen when they took a look at the victims of the Kiev regime. And do you see how the mainstream media, USAID, pressed the button called strategic silence? Another subject from these subjects. We've talked about the American digital informations in order to invoke censure, in order to preserve technological presence. And all this happens against the backdrop of the so-called spike big tech, of these grand technological corporations and the special services of the U.S. competitors and the competence of American authorities and the monopoly, despite the sentences of the free market, are not being tolerated. They are not allowed to exist. Under different pretexts, they're either eradicated or they're introducing unilateral sanctions against them. They're bringing them to bankruptcy They're pressuring them by several restrictions, legal cases, trying to bury them in litigation, or they're just holding them hostage, as it happened to the affiliate of Huawei, who was held for months on house arrest just for the fact that she's the daughter of the leader of the largest Chinese corporation. And a similar choice was made to the most dynamically developing digital platform on an American market, whose number of users surpasses 170 million. It's the service of short videos, TikTok. And here, together with the desire to deal with a competitor, there is another anti-Chinese policy, which is nothing but mass hysteria that is being led in the States. And allow me to shed a light on history. In April 2024, the U.S. introduced a law according to which the country, for safety reasons, and apparently the U.S. is trying to explain everything by this phrase, they should prohibit the work of a popular network, TikTok, if the Chinese company does not send this platform to the American company. And the deadline was set for January 19th. And by then, the situation hadn't changed. TikTok was blocked, but only for 24 hours, because Donald Trump, immediately after taking office, the next day, has postponed this decision for 90 days. And now the president who restored the work of this platform is trying to pose himself as the savior, as the someone who campaigns for the freedom of speech, who's trying to defend the interests of its users. But of course, there is always a different explanation, a condition where TikTok is allowed to stay in the American market if they give at least 50% of their shares to the investors from the U.S. I am at a loss for words at how best to describe this situation. Either to bring up the investment climate or just to say this is horrible. No matter what public rhetoric Washington tries to follow, they try to take the course in order to restore the monopoly in the digital informational space. And in order to do that, they're trying to take all the leading world online platforms under their control, which is why their measures, their style could differ, but they share the same goal: to keep the reins of control on the public opinion. And how all of this correlates with the amendment of freedom of speech in the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees. I have no idea. But as for the good news, in Bahrain on the 27th January, there was the ceremony of the opening of the International Cultural Humanitarian Project, Russian Seasons, Symphony Orchestra of Marian Theater, led by Valery Georgiev, presented the program Golden Classics. And on the February the 1st, Russian Seasons opened in Amman. On the platform of the National Museums, they've organized the exhibition Gifts of Hiva and Bukhara to the Russian Imperial House. There was the performance of the small ensemble of the quartet of Berlinsky, and in National Museum of Amman, they showcased the documentary movie of the TV channel RT Arabic called The Dagger. From the Russian side, the ceremony was attended by the Minister of Culture of Russian Federation, Olga Lyubimova. From the Bahraini side, the leader of the Department for the Matters of Culture, Halif Ben Ahmed Al Khalifa. From the Armenian part, Sultan Qaboos Mun bin Fakht Al Said, and the General Secretary of the National Museum, Jamal Al Musavi. The events were attended by representatives of wide culture and political circles, representatives of the circles of culture and art, who pointed out the master of art of Russian musicians and the exclusive side of the items on display. And the Russian Seasons exhibition in the year of 35 years of diplomatic relations with Bahrain and 40 years of diplomatic relations with Oman is especially important in the development of bilateral cultural humanitarian cooperation, as well as the popularization of Russian culture in the region of the Middle East. From January 26 to February 2nd, a regatta was held in Karachi, and we're grateful to our Pakistani colleagues. And this year, the Russian team took part in rowing and the rowing indoor, and 8 of our guys showed themselves perfectly. They earned gold medals in all the nominations, and we congratulate our athletes on such a brilliant performance in the international regatta. We'd like to recall that in summer 2024, the Pakistani team visited Russia in the Grand Moscow Regatta, and the female quartet who debuted came second. And we're sure that this practice of participating in sport events is not just a useful experience, but will contribute to bringing our countries and people closer. Another important anniversary that we, of course, have been preparing for, even though it's not exactly our direct leadership, but the Russian University of the Friendship of Peoples of Patrice Lumumba celebrates 65 years, but it is especially important and it correlates with our work. So the Russian University of the Friendship of People is a long-standing, reliable partner of the Russian MFA when it comes to expanding scientific and educational cooperation with other countries, promoting our technologies and Russian language, as well as forming an objective image of Russia abroad. During the years of existence of the university, we prepared over 200,000 highly qualified foreign specialists. Currently, they're housed to over 11,000 students from all the regions of the world. Fundamental knowledge and skills acquired in that university allowed foreign graduates of the university to successfully show their skills and talents in different professions and to solve any issues that their countries are facing when it comes to industry and economy. And aside from that, they prepare highly skilled specialists who are very in demand in our ministry, who work both in Moscow and abroad. And the university is a leader among Russian universities when it comes to building systematic, uninterrupted work with graduates on the base of the university. For many decades, there's an international coordinating council of graduates of the educational establishments, which is trying to help the work of 70 foreign associates, and the Russian MFA welcomes and will continue to support the program that was launched in 2023 by the Consortium of Russian Universities, Ambassadors of Russian Education and Science, the goal of which is to promote in the world of our education and science the use of instruments of local diplomacy, as well as all the chances of the leading international specialized and mutually beneficial platforms. And I even defended my dissertation at that university. Today, in the GLAF UPDK, there will be a special event for the Moscow Diplomatic Club dedicated to the Diplomat's Day, timed to the 80 years in the Great Patriotic War, and this is organized by the Council of Young Diplomats of the Russian MFA, and this is being held for the young employees of the Moscow Diplomatic Corps. It will be attended by around 100 diplomats from 43 countries of the world, representatives of the leadership of the ministry, the diplomatic academy, scientific and expert circles. There will be the concert of different ensembles, the presentation of the year of the work of the council over 10 years, and new events planned for 2025. All this will be presented today. And of course, there will be an exhibition dedicated to the Great Patriotic War, as well as the exhibition Diplomacy for the Sake of Peace, which was prepared by the Rostov Regional Patriotic Society. The roads of glory, our history. and we regularly support them in their actions. On February the 7th, Grenada celebrates their Independence Day, 51 years. On this day in 1974, the country has broken free from the colonial shackles, gaining sovereignty from the Great Britain. And for the half a century history, this small Caribbean state has led a difficult path of development, went through dramatic events, including the intervention of American troops in October 1983, and we appreciate our relations with Grenada that are based on mutual respect, trust, and taking into account each other's interests. We're open to further development of cooperation in both bilateral format and on international platforms. We wish them all the best. We wish them peace, well-being, and flourishment. And February the 8th, I believe it's something that all of us should celebrate. It's a special day. It's the day of Russian science. This day is timed to the establishment of the Science Academy, which was established on the order of the Emperor Peter I on the decree from February the 8th or January 28th by the former calendar of 1724. Ahead of this day, I would like to recall that science, despite the efforts of several states and regimes to create obstacles, cannot be limited to some borders. You know, as Chekhov said, the multiplication table cannot belong to someone. Russian MFA always helps the Russian scientific circle whenever we're asked to do it, when it's necessary. We welcome the creation of new as well as the expansion of existing forms of international scientific cooperation. 2024 was rich on large scientific international events that took place in the territory of our country. And here I'd like to point out the Kant Congress, the first Eurasian Congress of Linguists, the 22nd Mendeleev Congress on General and Applied Chemistry, which was timed to 190 years since the birth of great Russian chemist Dmitry Mendeleev, and the symposium Creating Future. And in 2024, it's especially important. Within the WIZEF Prize, we've opened the new nomination, Discovery. And here, the prize was given to the leading scientist, neurobiologist, the director of Shanghai International Center for Brain Research, Nikos Logotis. And here, international festivals, Science Zero Plus, are gaining popularity. There are large international platforms on popularizing scientific knowledge among youth and children, led by Russian initiators, and we hope to expand their geography in the upcoming year. We also have planned a range of international events in the current year to celebrate the anniversary of the leading universities, 270 years of the Moscow State University and 65 years of the Russian University of the Friendship of People. And even going a little ahead, we would like to congratulate the Russian scientific community with their professional holiday, because science is as limitless, and there is no limit to how grateful we have to be. And we have to remember it not just once a year. We should treat it with respect, with extra warmth towards our scientists who take care of our health, who help us in any and all areas of our life, who make new discoveries, and who largely preserve what we're calling civilization and humanity. So it's never too late or too early to address our scientists, who are, of course, world-class scientists. Thank you very much. We will continue to provide support to the action of the scientific circle to build the basis of fair cooperation of scientific circles for the development of humanity as a whole.
One more important announcement. I have for you. It is very interesting within the Diplomat Day. On December 10th, in a couple of days, on the Diplomat Day, we plan to update the official app of the Foreign Ministry of Russia. It's been operating since 2022 in Russian and English. You don't have to upload anything. Once again, all the users will receive a notification about necessity to update the app in due form. The app is available in App Store, Google Play, and Nash Store. During the update, our technical services made the app more stable, fixed bugs. We updated the app because of the requirements of the platforms where they are available, including in terms of information security. You can upload it now or later through the app. You will be able to keep updated about the latest news of the ministry, to see live broadcasts and receive contact information. And the interface of the app is almost the same as our official website. The navigation is convenient and easy. The link is placed on the main page of our website. The links will also be available in the text version of the briefing. I would like to also to say that we'll make a special message in our official accounts. Is the International Affairs with us? Yes, please. Thank you very much, and congratulations to you as well. I think that you are also always a part of it. Here's the question. The U.S. President Donald Trump signed a decree to renew the maximum pressure on Iran. Within this effort to put this pressure, Trump's administration will have a campaign aimed at reducing the export of Iranian oil to zero. What do you have to say about it? I think that the announcements made by Washington are not surprising, neither for us nor for Iran, and they are not new. The U.S. administration resorted to similar, more or less pressure, as they say, the maximum pressure, during the previous terms of President Trump as well. They introduced restrictions against Iran, including in the humanitarian sphere. For example, during the pandemic, American restrictions made it more difficult for Iran to procure vaccines against COVID. You remember that? That led to many people dying. The same Americans blocked the procurement of drugs to treat child's diseases. We talked about crazy policies that lie beyond the international law, especially when they concern vulnerable groups or situations to do with epidemics, with man-made catastrophes, when more support is needed. By the way, we were not alone. The UN experts who visited Iran talked that such legitimate restrictions are very bad, that they influence ordinary people. Amid this, the threats of the U.S. administration doesn't sound extraordinary. They support the practice of political associations. Now they say that openly. In January, it's been 5 years since they killed the leader of the Corps of the Defenders of the Islamic Revolution, and he was in his official capacity in a member state, and they didn't care about it. Our position is very clear. Unilateral coercive measures contradicting the international law and the resolutions of the UN, they are introduced against the mandate of the UN. This is enshrined in the Treaty on a Comprehensive Strategic Partnership signed on January 17, 2025 in Moscow. It enshrines the abhorrence of such measures, and they are called illegitimate and unfriendly. We continue to work in a similar way with our Iranian friends and consistently strengthen mutually beneficial cooperation for the sake of our both peoples. Pressure and sanctions won't prevent this. You know, some things boost bilateral contacts. Probably some things are long overdue, and then sanctions speeded up the situation. Thank you very much. One more question. On February the 1st, Transnistria does not receive gas, and this was as an excuse for statements of some officials in Moldova that Russia doesn't care about Transnistria. What do you think about it? We regularly comment on the situation. We publish information debunking such statements. I don't know who can believe such things, that Transnistria is left without gas because of Russia. At the same time, some people say that it's true, but it is not. Only people who do not understand the root causes of the current crisis can say that, or to intentionally distort the situation. That was the decision of the Kiev regime to stop the transit of Russian gas through the Ukrainian territory. One more reason is Chisinau refused to pay off the debt for this gas. Russia does care about Transnistria. 220 Russian people live there. Russian side proposed various ways to settle the situation, and all of them are blocked by the Moldavian side. I cannot say that we're talking about Moldavians, but I'm talking about the regime in Chisinau. They call it, I quote, getting rid of energy blackmail from Russia. What are they serious? It is clear that the so-called European gas originating from Russia is supplied to Transnistria through European mediators, but gas cannot be labeled because it's gas. Since recently supplies were renewed, this helped the situation to become less acute, because it's on the brink of becoming a catastrophe. But how long is this going to work? That's an open question. We support a long-lasting and sustainable settlement of the issue and is prepared to do all necessary to settle the situation. Thank you very much. Thanks. Is Ria Novosti with us? Good afternoon. We have two questions today. The first one. It's about the work of the Russian House in Baku. Azerbaijan said that the authorities of the country announced that the Russian House is to stop its activities there. And the Russian House received a relevant note. How does the MFA think about it? First, at the last briefing, we commented on absurd allegations against the Russian House in Baku. We underlined that we are waiting for these fakes to be debunked. In the media that published this information, Russia-Tajikistan also commented on the situation. I tell one thing again and again: when such things happen, when we see some spy frenzy, I want to ask them only one question: do you want to talk about the activities of special services seriously, or do you want to use this topic for fakes? Those who started can talk about special services of other countries, and this topic was hyped, and this does not reflect the potential of our relations. So our stance is clear. Third, as to the information about Azerbaijan sending a notification, indeed, through diplomatic channels, we received it. I can confirm that. As a response, we said that we are prepared to finalize the registration of the Russian House in line with the law of the Azerbaijani Republic, on the basis of bilateral agreement about the establishment and the conditions of work of cultural centers. This agreement dates back to 1997. It was signed on July the 3rd. We many times, and I'm sure that you can see it in various documents, we proposed to discuss this issue many times through diplomatic channels within consultations. These proposals were sent in the written form to the Azerbaijani side, so we hope that this issue will be settled positively. And all those media that hype the spy frenzy, please don't let yourselves be provoked. We're all adults. What are we talking about here? Do you have any more questions? Yes, I have one more question about France and Senegal. We learned that France withdrew its troops from Senegal. The soldiers will have to leave the country until September. What does Moscow think about it? And recently we see less presence of France on the African continent, especially militarily. As you said, recently Paris started to withdraw its contingent from Senegal. You know, unlike the West, we do not give evaluations to contacts between third countries. If it doesn't directly impact us, we don't touch upon these issues. We cannot but note that the aspiration of a number of countries to receive true sovereignty and diversification of foreign political and economic partners is felt more and more seriously. It's natural. This tendency reflects the emergence of a multipolar world order that is going to be based on mutually respectful relations between states, and the realization of this new reality of ex-colonizers goes difficult not only to France but to other countries They saw African continent not only as colonies, but as the zone of their own interests. All political scientists and experts say if formally the process of decolonization ended in the second half of the 20th century, in the first 10 years of the 21st century, but essentially the treatment of ex-colonizers to their ex-colonies as a philosophy, as an ideology, and as a practice didn't go away. Big businesses giving laws unfair and not equal through soft power that is a kind of poisonous gas. Through force, they try to retain the model of controlling these colonies. They don't care about these countries, they care about natural resources there. And given cultural ties and long-standing economic cooperation, we can talk about full withdrawal from Senegal. Paris will aspire to retain their positions and influence there, but the question is what kind of agenda they can propose instead. This kind of dictatorship and superiority and dominance, exploitation of the African resources, disappearing history, and the practice to deploy military contingents disappears as well. These countries, they did not help to maintain security. Instead of accusing Russia and other foreign actors on the African continent, Paris should think about the reasons of the current situation and recognize that they are responsible for the situation. They should ask themselves why the African countries do not want to maintain relations on the current basis. If that is it, is Moscow Baku with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. The question is as follows. Now, Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, has a visit to the US. During one of the meetings with the government, he said that Armenia is at the intersection, and the best way to is to provide a list of their bilateral agenda. How can you comment on the current situation? We have commented on during previous briefings. As far as I understand, you and you are the publisher and agency Moscow Baku, meaning Moscow Baku. You are turning 10 years, and you don't plan on changing your title and to change it to Moscow Yerevan. It isn't bad, but it wasn't in your plans. So please work within your agenda between on the relations between Azerbaijan and Yerevan. We have a lot to comment on in this agenda, but we have to deal with a lot of things. And thank you to a publication that from year to year you covered bilateral relations between our countries, Russia and Azerbaijan, and I wish you long years, inspiration, success. That's all I can say. Thank you very much. and for congratulations as well. Thanks to you. Do you have any more questions? Let's move on. Is the portal Ukraine.ru with us? Good afternoon. Madam Zakharova, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask you a question. I'm joining to congratulations of my colleagues with the upcoming Diplomat Day. You said that there were outrageous statements of Donald's administration's State Secretary Rubio. The concept America First is a concerning motto. This is quite similar to German's motto, Germany is first. But the peace through force can bury diplomacy. This doesn't reflect the commitment of the EU for the UN Charter. Does President Trump see some kind of prospects for the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis through negotiations with the UN? From our experience, I mean statistics and experience, we are prepared to work with those who respect others and take respectful approach based on respect to bilateral relations and the understanding that words should be reflected in actions. We are prepared to the situations. We had a lot of difficult partners. There were a lot of difficult situations that we overcame. They became our experience and gave results. That's exactly how we treat this particular situation. As to the possible role of the US in the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, yet again, it will depend on the certain actions and plans of the new administration and on how they act. For now, they say a lot of words, they make a lot of statements, but there are no certainty about their actions. So prospects for negotiations or any kind of steps in this regard would be preliminary. But our position is very clear. Every day, at all levels, unanimously, all the representatives, from President of our country to Minister of Foreign Affairs, government representatives, and other speakers, all of them say about Russia's approach and view on the crisis and the root causes of the crisis, as well as on the settlement. There is no problem with this. As to Washington, they have to word out their policy, but we will see at their actions. But it's nothing new, and we say it every day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. News.ru, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. News.ru. Here, Pavel Vorobyov. We have two questions for you. The first question is about the new department of the Russian MFA. Sergei Lavrov has recently presented a new Department for Partnership with Africa. And while Russia expanding its ties with Africa, it diminishes its ties with the European countries. Is the ministry going to transfer diplomats working in Europe to Africa? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Is the ministry going to gradually transfer diplomats working in Europe to Africa? Since you're our regular visitor and guest at our briefings, and you have been listening to our comments and actions, and we have made our comments with regard to the actions that are taken by our diplomatic service and actions that were taken by non-friendly states against our country. They have been closing consulate generals. They have been expelling diplomats. They have been making the work of Russian diplomats extremely dangerous on the territory of their countries. You probably remember that dozens and later hundreds of diplomats had to return to Russia, not because they were summoned by Russia, but because their work was blocked in those countries with the methods that I had listed earlier, methods that were taken against non-friendly countries, or should I say non-friendly regimes. And because of the policy of Russian containment and then inflicting a military defeat to Russia, waging an information war against our country, blocking transportation, trade, humanitarian exchanges and ties. As a result of these actions, we have made decisions in order to reorient the work of the Russian Foreign Ministry to another direction that would bring tangible results, where we could work extra hard because the international situation requires it. In terms of diplomacy in many other areas like economy, humanitarian exchanges, etc. Since 2022, it has been commented many times by Sergei Lavrov. He was speaking about it publicly, and there were meetings with diplomats, with those diplomats who had been expelled by non-friendly regimes. They had to leave those countries, and we have initiated the employment process. And you are talking about planning to transfer these diplomats. Well, actually, we started it not because of our desire to diminish our presence somewhere, but we have been started to do that due to the actions of certain countries and regimes against our diplomats. And in line with the updated foreign policy concept of our country, we have been transferring resources like human resources from the Western direction to the more relevant and necessary directions like Global East and Global South. But it started as an adequate evaluation and response to the situation fostered by the collective West. Our cooperation with Africa becomes more versatile and multifaceted, and it is demonstrated by the establishment of the new Department for Partnership with Africa. We have been setting up new embassies in Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, and Sierra Leone, and soon the embassies in Niger and Sierra Leone will resume their activities. We'll plan to open an embassy now of our country in South Sudan, and we are going also to open an embassy in Gambia, Liberia, the Comoros, and Togo. And we are sending there not only diplomats who are specializing in studying Africa, but other diplomats who worked in other directions of the Russian foreign policy, like in European track, for example. It is true that our diplomats worked in other directions. There were cases when diplomats went to other countries or continued their work in the central headquarters of the Russian Foreign Ministry, or have remained committed to their work in European countries, but others have decided, for example, to change their qualifications since they know the language, they know the country specifics, and they would easily switch and would swiftly go to work to other continents and countries. Thank you, and we wish luck to our diplomats in working in new directions and tracks. And we have a question on Ukraine. The Ukrainian ambassador in the United States claimed that Kiev is ready to discuss the holding of elections until the end of 2025 if this issue will be initiated by the new U.S. administration. What's your position on that due to the current level of the sovereignty of the modern Ukraine? How these elections could be democratic if they depend on the will, mood and decisions of another state? In my opinion, the Ukrainian ambassador has ashamed and embarrassed her own country. Probably she is trying to send an SOS signal to everyone that she's going to say the words of truth for the first time over the past month, but actually she said what we have been speaking about for years. There is no democracy. There are no electoral processes. You know, when Zelensky and Poroshenko were running for elections, we have always stated that there are no democracy, and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of people in Ukraine, this process should be undertaken bearing in mind all the aspects. Elections are necessary to give the chance for the country, its people, to exist peacefully together, one by side, and to address all the outstanding matters. The Kiev regime has been refuting all that, and they stated that that Ukraine is the most democratic and free country. The West called Ukraine a young democracy that soon will become a leader in all aspects. And now the Ukrainian ambassador says that as soon as we have a green signal from Washington, we will be ready to start electoral procedures. It confirms what all our experts in our country and in other countries have been saying. Experts all over the world have been saying that the current Zelensky's status is totally legitimate. And again, it was confirmed by the remarks of the Ukrainian ambassador. The Ukrainian official has just confirmed that Ukraine has no sovereignty in any area. This country doesn't have a legitimate president, and she has just confirmed it. Ukraine depends on the will of its Western masters, and Ukraine cannot even take its own decisions in the issues of the issue that characterize any nation. Well, if we speak about elections, just look at the electoral processes in Venezuela, in Georgia. It doesn't matter what international organizations are speaking for the West. What's important for the West is what they saw before the elections took place. They have pay attention to all the small details that are not necessary. And we hear Ukraine saying that they are waiting for the signal from Washington. Again, it's a blatant admission of the fact that there is no legal founding of what's going on in the state of Ukraine and what remains of it. How is it even possible? And the West sees no problem with that. They're probably going to wait and see if elections could take place in that country or not. They have the West had so many problems with elections in other countries, like they had wrong candidates, the coverage in mass media is wrong, but nonetheless, the voting results have shown that those elections were totally legitimate. But here they are trying to link elections with the foreign structures who are going to dictate the will to the Ukrainians. Thank you for your commentary. China Media Group, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Today and before that, you have quoted so many statements of Donald Trump, but there are so many of them that we have two questions. Less than 48 hours after Donald Trump signed a bill on tariffs on Canada and Mexico, U.S. President stated his decision to delay its implementation for 30 days that should be characterized as he has no clear plans for that, and at the same time Donald Trump didn't delay the rise in tariffs on goods from China. However, this increase was lower than expected. What's your position on that? I believe that all the experts have recognized that this is the tactic that, or strategy, or a style of the current Trump administration and its members. That's why I've been saying that we need to look for specific steps taken by them. Increasing tariffs is not something new in the Donald Trump's policy. The same ultimatums and actions were taken by President Trump in his first presidential term. And at that time, they used illegitimate restrictions, tariff restrictions that go against WTO standards. And by the way, all these measures inside WTO were made up by the United States themselves, and now they go against what they've been imposing to everyone else in the past. Since they are losing to China in terms of economic competition, and not only China, the United States is trying to rewrite its own rules and the rules that they have been writing for everyone else, and they are acting like other countries of the collective West. And since you started with this comparison and said that they have no clear plans for the future, I believe that we could allude to the Western movies. They are trying to rob the express train of the Chinese economy. I believe that such protectionist measures and restrictive measures go against the rules of international trade and the relevant international trading system that was set up with the participation of the US. They have a negative effect on international trade, lead to its fragmentation. And I believe that by threatening with tariffs, They are trying to put pressure on trade partners so that these partners would obey to the U.S. demands. I think that following the example of Mexico and Canada, who promised to take certain measures, including to tighten up migration control on the U.S. borders, we see that quite often trade partners of the United States, whose economies significantly depend on the American market, are ready to make some concessions in order to prevent escalation in trade. I've read a lot about it, and we have already heard the positions of China, and they are saying that in the trade war of two major economies there could not be any winner, and its negative consequences will have a global nature. And another statement made by Donald Trump during his press conference with the Prime Minister of Israel, he stated that U.S. will take control of the Gaza Strip, and we will own it, and we will be responsible for diffusing all the dangerous and detonated bombs and other weapons. He also added that the U.S. will wipe off the map all the damaged buildings and create conditions for the economic development. Well, as for the Gaza Strip situation, it's a tragedy that is unveiling there over the past decades, and this tragedy now has turned into a disaster. We proceed from the idea that today it is important to ensure the implementation of ceasefire agreement signed by Israel and Hamas and the exchange of prisoners of war. And I hope that these agreements will be realized. The conflict has taken lives of tens of thousands of people, and I hope that this crisis will be addressed. It is important to provide humanitarian assistance to everyone in need. It is important to ensure a lasting ceasefire, and I believe that addressing this objective is going to be a main and central objective, and all international efforts should be aimed at that, including the efforts of all parties involved in the crisis, and to create proper conditions for the full-fledged settlement of the Palestinian issue. We believe that any speculations or statements of a populist nature and other measures of palliative nature are counterproductive and won't help to address the issue, and they just add more tensions in the regions and exacerbate the existing problems. Russia, in its part, as we have stated many times, is ready, together with other responsible members of the international community, to take the most active part in overcoming the effects of the conflict in Gaza and at large, to find ways to achieve a mutually acceptable, comprehensive, and lasting settlement of the Palestinian issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Reuters with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Our question has to do with potential negotiations on settling the Ukrainian conflict. And in particular, Russian leadership, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, repeatedly stated that within the potential negotiations on regulating the conflicts, it could only talk about stable, legally binding agreements that could eradicate the rooting causes of conflict, where could be established the mechanism of impossibility of their violation. What are those agreements? So which sides, other from Russia and Ukraine, should sign these agreements, and who should pose as a guarantor of these agreements? You know, if we formulate the answers to these questions, then I believe each of us should get at least 5 Nobel Prizes. Because yes, of course, these are the questions on the international agenda, but let's try to look in detail on what could be possible in the format of our communication. Russia repeatedly stated its readiness for negotiations. And you see, this is a diplomatically political approach to settling crisis, including the Ukrainian one. We advocate for a truly final, fair, and stable settlement, which includes the eradication of the whole complex of its root causes. And this is exactly what the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, repeatedly states. So what are those root causes? Let us go through them once again. First of all, it's the violation of agreements not to expand NATO to the east, the aggressive consumption of the alliance of the whole geopolitical space up to our borders. And the second, it's blatantly, and here we use the Western terminology, racist, and it has been legally established, neo-Nazi, which is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is the matter of habit, or disclosure, but it's the segregation of people based on their nationality in order to humiliate them or even destroy them. So these racist, or as we say, neo-Nazi actions of the Kiev regime after the coup d'etat of 2014 to deliberately, consciously, targetedly planned destruction of anything Russian, the language, the mass media, culture, history, traditions, religion, and here I mean the canonical Orthodox Church, and of course then it came to the eradication of people and the temporary peace, or the so-called freezing of the conflicts, are unacceptable because they will continue to be used by the West, by the collective West, by its different representatives, in order to reinforce their military potential of the Kiev regime and, of course, any efforts of an armed revenge. We need stable, legally binding agreements and mechanisms that would guarantee the unacceptance of any renewal of this crisis. And as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, pointed out on January 14th during his press conference on the results in the foreign policy of 2024, we need agreements that would fixate any conditions of ensuring safety of Russia and the legal interest of security of our neighbors, but in the context that would abide by international law, reinforcing the impossibility of violating these agreements. Is there a basis for this? Of course. It's all the workings that have been agreed upon in the spring of 2022 during different rounds of Russian-Ukrainian negotiations in Belarus and Turkey, which oversaw neutral, out-of-bloc, and nuclear-free status of Ukraine, its demilitarization and denazification, as well as the prohibition of placing of foreign troops and bases on the Ukrainian territory, and all the positions that have been voiced by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, when he addressed Minister of Foreign Affairs in the June of 2024. I'd like to recall that during the negotiations of 2022, he had plans that the guarantors of these agreement, and I'd like to draw your attention once again so that the mass media and your colleagues understand this perfectly. This was during the negotiations of 2022. It was planned that the guarantors of this agreement would be the permanent members of the UN Security Council, including Germany, Israel, Italy, Canada, Poland, and Turkey. And this list changed constantly. As for the perspective of future possible agreements and who exactly was posed as the guarantors of those peace, we will see of the after new peace negotiations if they are to take place. Right now, I can't give you any more details. It's difficult to oversee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is Balt News with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. In Estonia, as you know, they're trying to pass over the Orthodox Church in Constantinople to tear it apart from Russia. And in Latvia, the elderly Russians are made to pass the Latvian test, threatening deportation. So they're trying to limit the right for religious beliefs, masking it under the issues of security. So could Russian Federation get the support from the UN in order to denounce Baltic authorities and their policy of limiting the rights of Russian Orthodox Church? You know, we've commented on this several times. The official town continues to raise the tension on the Estonian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy in order to undermine its canonical unity with the Russian Orthodox Church, or maybe fully eradicate this structure, passing everything under the leadership of the Constantinople Patriarchy. So in the fight to preserve its existence, the Estonian Orthodox Church have had to change their name twice to rewrite their charter. And we see, and we're being told, we get the reports about it, many complaints of the Orthodox believers of violence and rampant lawlessness from local authorities on different levels. I would like to recall about the open letter of the leader of the Pukhtis Stavropigil female monastery of Filaret towards the State Council, which is the highest representative legal basis, and towards the ministers of this country who assess the upcoming amendments to the law of churches in the Estonian Republic as a threat to closing of the monastery. According to her, the goal of this project is to force the Estonian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy to change its judicial basis and to go under the leadership of Constantinople. According to her, in 1990s, the monastery fully renounced any property without compromise and without any claims. They passed over anything to the state in order to keep the spiritual link with the Haring Church. Just one quote that reeks of unlawfulness and the lack of any beliefs here. You put the monastery outside the law, only proposing two options: either the change of legal base or forced liquidation, she said in her letter. We denounce such approaches and we call on the Estonian authorities to closely follow the rights of any religious groups. We're also appalled by the situation of forcing these women who for over 70 years, those who were in Riga, the Troitsergiev monastery, and who are Russian citizens, they're being forced to take a test of the Latvian language according to the amendments adopted in 2023 about the law of immigration. I'm sorry, but when we read the books about Nazism, about the Third Reich, or watched the movies, it's something from their practices. It's their style. This is what is taking place in Estonia. It's horrible. It's inhuman. There is no common sense, and it's shameful practice, supposedly necessary as their fight against threats to security of those countries, in particular Latvia. It's not a fight against threats. Is this 70-year-old woman a threat to Latvia? These women who are 70 years and older, serving the church, the monastery, renouncing the regular life by gathering at the monastery, they're the ones who pose a threat to official Riga. It seems Riga's affairs are truly going bad. If now they believe that these women are a threat to them, and the threat is coming from the church, but what kind of safety are they talking about? It's not the physical safety of the state of Latvia. What kind of safety does Riga speak about? What exactly are they threatening? What could these women possibly threaten? If they truly threaten anything, it's just one thing. That their beliefs and their service, their dedication to true things and ideas, they are a threat to lies and to that which is called fake, but it's just a distortion of reality. That's what it is. They will preserve the truth. They made the choice, and they will bear that cross until they die. We regularly call the attention of the Secretary General of the UN, the Higher Commissioner of the UN on the human rights and the special procedures of the UN, mechanisms of the OSCE, on these policy of limiting the rights of Russian Orthodox Church, on following Russian citizens, and it's the blatant violation of the right to freedom of religious beliefs, overseen in the International Pact of Civil and Political Rights, as well as International Convention on liquidating all forms of racial discrimination. We will mention this again during the 58th session of the Human Rights Council, which will open its work in Geneva on the 24th of February. We would also like to point out that the detailed material full of facts on following Russian Orthodox churches is included in the thematic and country reports being prepared by those who work at the ministry. And you see the ambassador at large who works with the rights of religious beliefs. He now introduces the second report on the situation of violation of rights of religious beliefs in Ukraine. But apparently, these reports will be issued not only when it comes to Ukraine. We have enough to publish these articles on other countries as well, and these countries, you know them all too well, the countries of the collective West. And the situation in the Baltic countries is reflected in another report on the rights of our citizens abroad, and it was published on our website in December 2024. And proof of the violations of those rights on blatant neo-Nazism and racism. And we see this. All these reports can be found on the website of the Russian MFA. All these reports are published and included in our briefing. They're passed over to several structures. Do you remember how the USAID formed the task for mass media? Strategic silence. And this strategic silence is not only present, it has infected foreign structures. And they're under colossal influence, colossal pressure of different kind, of the same Anglo-Saxons. We will continue our work with the leaderships of international organizations. No matter what state they're in, no matter how much pressure they're facing, we will try to call their attention to active work, providing facts and information, trying to get any reaction so that it works as it should. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is the Iceland radio with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, yes, please. Good afternoon, can you hear us? I believe that the Iceland radio has disappeared. You were here, I can even see you, but I can't hear you, unfortunately. Yes. Yes, now I can hear you. I would like to congratulate you on the holiday, but, well, the holiday is only coming up. You've conveniently mentioned USAID. But is it too early to celebrate the fact that this organization was destroyed? Perhaps something else is coming as a replacement. What do you think about that? You think no one is happy? We have nothing to celebrate. To celebrate the fact that it was closed out. How much damage has been done? If they repented for their lawlessness, or if they've eradicated mistakes, if they could guarantee to the international community that this would not happen again, then we could be happy. But right now it's just a collective shock that the world experiences as a whole. Everyone who gets new details every day. The only thing, perhaps, that we could mention that we feel satisfied about is that everything that we've been talking about turned out to be true. You see, truth will always out. It doesn't matter if it takes a year, 2, or more. But mass media are working actively, and right now time is flying by, and we see that something that's been hidden for decades is coming to light. So we have no choice but to feel satisfied that everything we've been mentioning, using facts, was confirmed fully once the data about the action of this structure was revealed. So of course we feel some sort of satisfaction that we've stood strong against the criticism and threats when USAID was closed in our country, saying it's nothing but an agency on helping the development. It's a machine of interfering in internal affairs. It's doing nothing but contributing to the change of state affairs. But the last thing they're doing is actually aiding anyone. The rest has nothing to do with satisfaction or joy. It's actually quite sad and tragic that the leading international superpower is spending money on destructive actions that lead to catastrophes and tragedies all over the world. Colossal sums of money are spent on pseudo-scientific concepts that have to do with their extremist LGBT, transgender, non-binary, quadroberes. Large sums of money were pumped into shaking up the public opinion. So much money was spent on mass media who did nothing but destroy the freedom of speech, who turned these into an instrument of propaganda, which is actually prohibited in the US. And I'd like to recall that the kind of work at the agency in our country, we qualified as nothing but not worthy of the intended goal. As for the future of this agency, I believe that one way or another, it's going to be very difficult, not only to the United States, but to the countries of the collective West to renounce the mentality of interfering in internal affairs, because then they have to renounce as a whole the concept of their dominance, of their exclusiveness, of enslaving other countries, of using their resources, of this kind of relationship as a colonial power and their colonies. And USAID is nothing but a consequence of this ideology being used in practice. Okay.
I would like to talk about Asia. I recently came back from trips to Laos and Myanmar. I would like to learn more about Russia-Myanmar relations. What are perspectives of cooperation with the current military government there? What does Russian officials what's the official stance of the Russia towards this country? Our countries are tied by relations of friendship and cooperation for more than 75 years. We have similar approaches to many relevant issues in the international and regional agenda. We both share our vision about multiple world order based on cultural and civilizational diversity, sovereign right of every country to determine their path of development. As to the internal political situation in Myanmar, we support the principle of non-interference into the internal affairs. We are convinced that the situation can be settled through the efforts of people of Myanmar and international help. First of all, through ASEAN, can play on the supporting role. All sanctions and attempts to isolate this country with financing, military and technical support to the radical opposition are counterproductive and won't bring peace to the country. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. Is Lentaru with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have the following question. Recently, President of Poland said that Warsaw should be invited to the table of negotiations on Ukraine, and the presence of Poland would be in the interest of Ukraine. What does Moscow think about the possibility to invite other countries to the negotiating table? Is Warsaw's presence admissible? I partly answered your question when I talked to your colleague from the Chinese Media Corporation. You know what is interesting? You cite President of Poland, Duda. He said that Warsaw should be invited to the negotiating table about Ukraine. But is it the same Warsaw and the same Duda who talk that there's no place for negotiations, everything should be settled through force? Do I understand it correctly? Is it the same official Warsaw and the very same president of Poland who supplied arms to the Kiev regime and who worked to escalate the crisis? Do I understand it correctly? And now they are talking about negotiating table. They have to understand that the negotiating table means diplomacy and political methods and methodology, and not the methods that lead to the escalation of the situation. It is clear. I would like to note that since 2022, NATO representatives and the EU representatives have talked multiple times that no negotiations and no negotiating table can exist. Everything should be settled on the battlefield. If they changed their mind, probably they should articulate it better and to say that they have another concept, and they have to show this through their actions. They have to act for the sake of the peace process. What kind of peace process are we talking about? What kind of negotiations are we talking about if they supply arms and do all they can so that the Kiev regime continue hostilities till the last Ukrainian? There's a clear problem in their logic. The rest of the question was answered earlier. Thank you. Is the Moscow Post with us? Good afternoon. We have 3 questions today. First, the close circle of President Trump make a lot of statements, outrageous and sometimes even debunking, which ones attracted your most attention? What can you say about them? I wouldn't comment on them. I'm interested in facts that they provide. I'm not interested in the evaluation of the situation, and I'm interested only in facts. I would like to read and understand what happened in reality, where money went, what the strategy was, what kind of accountability there was. That's what I'm interested in facts, the true, real data. And people can draw conclusions for themselves. That's what attracts my most attention. We saw a lot of evaluations, but I would like to focus more on facts. When any of the representatives of the close circle of President Trump share facts, probably they share screenshots, links to documents themselves, or any other data, direct quotes. These are the most interesting things. I was shocked by the strategic silence as a concept that was proposed by the media for grants that they received. But I thought that they worked differently, not like that, and I was shocked by gender agenda that was reduced to gender operas and money to physically change gender in. And I thought that they promoted and these ideas, but they limited themselves in their activities. But they did things that are shameful even to talk about, and I don't have such words because such things are not usually pronounced out loud. And the programs to change regimes and the money that was spent there, these are the most interesting topics for me. And thank you. The next question. Press Secretary of the EU on Foreign Affairs and Security Policy said that Russia every day terrorizes the population of Ukraine and targets civilians. Russia will be punished for this. 5 years ago, the first administration of the US president degraded the status of the EU to the international organization. What can you say about that? But those are people, illiterate people, they cannot say anything but the things that they have in their guides. The terrorized population of Ukraine, what are they talking about? The EU representative on foreign affairs, Al-Nouni, does he know that Zelensky recognized that there were planned assassinations and killings of civilians in our country? I mean civilians, not even military people. And these representatives, does he know that for decades the Meritorious website have existed for years, and other prohibited organizations and websites, they contain information about people that must be killed from the point of view of the Kiev regime? Do you know about the number of terror attacks that are committed by Kiev? And they publicly take responsibility for them. They openly tell about how they kill Russian people. Do the European representatives see this? Do they even look at it? We regularly inform people about the terror attacks, but this representative, did he see these photos during the briefing that took place a week ago? How journalists listened to what I talked about in terror. They were in tears. I heard experts who shared information, and these are people who deal with dead bodies, but they couldn't be calm while talking about what they found out in the city of Ruskaya Porечье. All the acts that Ukrainians commit, are they going to be commented on by the European representatives, or are they going to continue to forget about it? But we will continue to inform you about atrocities committed by Ukrainians. That's why we call these people Ukrainian clique. You had one more question, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, about the Trump administration. It degraded the EU to the international organization. Well, it's something that Washington has felt for a long time about Western Europe and the EU. These are their real emotions about those who lost their sovereignty, because the level of in the EU cannot be commented on. And just to there's no point to depict it, and our president said and warned Western Europeans that they are losing their sovereignty and even their own dignity. They behave like slaves towards their overseas, not even a brother, because Washington do not consider them as a relative, but to their overseas master. So they don't treat them as people. And the last question on in February 1945, there was a Yalta conference, and what's today's perspectives for the similar scenario in today's settlement? Sergei Lavrov wrote about it in his article of February 4. Is Rudolf with us?
Hopefully everything is good with you. I'm Niaz Mustafa, and I have two questions. My first question is related to Syria, which is we saw that last month a delegation from Russia went to Syria, and you had some discussions as well. My question is, there's news reports that Damascus officials asked Russia to hand them over Bashar Assad, the former president of Syria. Is it true that they have asked you this thing, or what do you have about this?
Вы знаете,
information about the contents of the negotiations that took place in January in Damascus as part of the visit of our delegation to Damascus, led by Mikhail Bogdanov. This information was given in our message of January 29. To comment particular aspects of this context are not important in our view.
Okay. My second question is, are you supporting the decentralized government in Syria in a way that Kurdish and Druzes have their own administration? And what do you have for the next government of Syria? How should it be?
Our stance in this regard is clear. We said it multiple times. We proceed from the fact that this concerns the internal policy of the country, and Syrians themselves should determine their own fate within their own internal dialogue, but they have to ensure interests of all ethnic and confessional groups, including Kurds, Druzes, and they also have to respect the fundamental principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Syria.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Спасибо вам тоже.
Good day to you too. Is the Caucasus newsletters with us? The Iranian ambassador to Russia announced that Russia and Azerbaijan and Iran will sign an agreement to build a railway. How does Russia evaluate perspectives to launch the western part of the transport corridor north-south? What questions are going to be discussed during the trilateral meeting? The development of the international transport corridor north-south was a central topic of negotiations between presidents of Russia and Iran in Moscow on January 17th. I think that you saw the text of the agreement that was signed at a high level about comprehensive strategic partnership between our countries. This issue was given special attention there. Our priority is to create a smooth railway logistics on the western part of the corridor. This will be possible after the part between the cities of Resht and Astara of 172 kilometers is built. The intergovernmental agreement providing export loan for these purposes was signed in Tehran on May 17, 2023. We note aspirations of all three countries of the intergovernmental agreement about the corridor to achieve these goals and to expand the potential of the corridor. This route was launched and operates. The flow is growing from year to year, and the full-scale building up of this route is an item in the agenda, and we want to create comfortable conditions for our suppliers. Is another with us? Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have a question about the Middle East. Minister of Sport and Culture of Israel said that Israel won't let Hamas to retain control over Gaza, even if the deal on exchange of hostages is violated. What do you have to say about it in light on the start of the first phase on the ceasefire in Gaza? I recently talked about it while giving an answer to one of the previous questions. I have nothing to add. Every state has a government. Each government is formed differently in various countries. There are coalition governments, governments of one party, various governments has ministers with other mandates and political views on internal and external political processes. We believe that our priority are the statements of the leadership of the country, as well as the leader of MFA of the country. In this case, we can talk about it in detail. It doesn't mean that other members of the government of other countries cannot or must not have their own point of views. No, but for us, signals and counterparts are the main source. Thank you. Is Almaydin with us?
Hello. I think you already answered my question already. Well, perfect. Thank you. Now, moving on then. Baku TV, please. Yes, I am here. Hello. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. We have only one question today. Heads of foreign ministries, transportation ministries and customs services of Russia and Azerbaijan will meet soon to discuss a rail link Russia-Stara of the international north-south transportation corridor. So the route is preliminarily agreed several months ago. The foreign ministries of Russia and Iran discussed the Zangezur corridor. Is there any progress in this area? Once we have information on that, we'll share it with you. As of now, I have no additional news for you. After E, please. Yes, hello. I would like to join the kind words of celebration on the Diplomat's Day. If you remember, I asked the question about European documents where they remove corruption with the different synonyms. Were you able to look into the question? Yes. I have looked at the statistics, figures, and phrases themselves, and it seems that new White House administration wants to address disparity in mutual trade with EU countries that actually has been to the EU's advantage. If we look at the 11th month of 2024, more than $180 billion, which is more than the similar period of 2023. For Americans, it is a proof that EU is trading with the US in not fair way, as Americans say, but Americans don't mention that the trade, when you look at the trade and services, the situation is different, and the trade and services is to the US advantage. It is clear that additional restrictions on EU goods will have negative consequences for European manufacturers, but at the same time we see that the EU economy is struggling. There is a slow GDP growth. According to Eurostat 2024, it was 0.9%. The industrial production since 2023 is lowering. Well, the time will show how it's going to affect the EU countries and their economies, how it's going to affect the EU prosperity. But I believe that's not what Washington is interested in. Washington has a pragmatic approach. Their trade relations with the EU are not equal, and I believe You are talking about the use of different words, and they just have no time to use the proper wording. They just want to write what they think. But sometimes we believe that their ears are clogged with wax, and they have prohibited the majority of people to listen to and to understand. It is clear to everyone that EU interests are not going to be taken into account by Washington. Washington is not Russia that has always been advocating for equality and respect. Relations with Washington are different. They were trying to hide it, to disguise it, but now they are showing their true colors. And we see now that the European Union itself has been teaching Washington for years. That's how Washington should work with the EU, actually. Probably there were times, and probably someone remember those times, when Russia and Western Europe could say Washington no, or could express their own interests, and now it's not even possible. I believe they're just sending checks there and explain what, and they specify the sums of money that should be paid. At the same time, the EU has been repeating as a mantra that they are autonomous from the political point of view, but at the same time they are acting together, that they have a mutual understanding, but in reality they have no strategic autonomy, they have no union, nothing. And it's not just a struggle, it's not a fight. The United States are just trying to get advantageous conditions for them. How are they doing that? What was beneficial for Russia and EU is blocked by the US, like resource base, energy resources, other competitive goods. Among other things, we see what Americans are doing with China on the European market by obstructing the imports of Chinese goods. They want to prevent the normal trading relationships between Europe and China. They won't allow it. There are so many examples to give. We believe that the EU is becoming increasingly dependent on the United States, but yet they prefer not to speak about it. The bilateral trade between Russia and the EU has decreased, and we reoriented our trade to friendly countries, and transatlantic trade wars pose no threat to our country. At the same time, uncontrollable use of tariffs and use of economic leverages to attain on geopolitical goals, ignoring the rules of international trade adopted by the WTO, as I've told you already and I have said many times, is fraught with high risks for the global economy. It will result into turbulent global markets, it will disrupt supply chains, it will disrupt countries, and the poorest countries will be affected the most, and the United States are not so interested in the prosperity of other countries, and in reality we're truly concerned by the Western policy that is bringing damage to the entire world. If the increased tariffs on European goods will help Europeans and the EU to realize that their anti-Russian policy was a mistake, that which they've taken on due to the US pressure, will be ready to reconsider the need to continue working with European markets, taking into account our national interests and the history of working with the EU. And if you allow, I would like to draw your attention to the alarming information from Riga. There, military pensioners are not getting their pension payments anymore. Embassy of Russia in Riga is not picking up the phone, and they don't know what to do. Probably you could do something to alleviate their worries. Thank you. Thank you for your warning. Was it in Riga, you said? Yes, Riga, military pensioners, they haven't received their payments in January, and they don't know what to do. They can't call the embassy because the embassy is not picking up the phone. As for your question on terminology, because I was talking about the economic cooperation between the EU and the US, but as for the corruption terminology and its use in EU documents, I will go back to it later if you allow. Voice of the Fatherland, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Can you see me? Yes, I can see you. There is an ambassador at large in the Russian Foreign Ministry that is responsible for covering war crimes committed by the Kiev regime, and that the ministry have an ambassador at large that will be responsible for covering war crimes committed by NATO and Western regimes. You know, in our departments we have special sections like section of NATO, section related to the US policy. In the past, they were responsible for developing relations with our country, but due to the recent policy of both NATO and the United States, our relations have narrowed, have almost disappeared. They go through the process. They have went through the process of elimination, I should say. They are taking actions against our country. We have the relevant departments responsible for working with NATO and US. We're talking about war crimes committed by the Kiev regime because we're talking about acts of terrorism, murders, violent acts, cyber attacks. And we have highlighted what the Kiev regime has been doing by appointing Ambassador at Large, Mr. Miroshnik. And again, as for NATO and the United States, we have the relevant departments responsible for that. Sergei Naryshkin offered to discuss the issue of legitimacy of Ukrainian territories. What do you think about it? Well, if Mr. Naryshkin said it, well, it means that we need to discuss it. Are you ready to take part in the discussions? Is Russia interested? Are you interested in taking part in the workshop of restituting Russia within the borders of 1945? Earlier, you were interested in that. It was last year. Well, I think you can send an invitation and we'll get your response who is going to take part in that event. Thank you. Embassy Live, please. Посольская жизнь. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. We have only one question. First, I would like to congratulate you and the Russian diplomats on their professional day. According to Olga Lyubimova, the Russian Ministry of Culture, it is important to develop cultural ties with the Islamic world. Kazan will host another summit, Kazan Forum, Russia's Islamic world. And for the first time, ministers of culture of the countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation will meet there in Kazan, and also some representatives were invited to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and there was a proposal to organize a large-scale exhibition on the history of the Islamic world in Russia. Olga Lyubimova also offered to organize several events related to that. And can we believe that the visit of representatives of countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to Russia will be a political success for our country? We are supporting strengthening contacts with the countries of the global majority, and the Russian Foreign Ministry supports the idea to strengthen international cultural and humanitarian cooperation. The successful cooperation of the relevant projects and programs contributes to better understanding between peoples and societies of our countries. It helps to exchange views with regard to the global cultural agenda and global agenda in general. And as for the projects that you mentioned and developing cooperation, I believe that you need to speak to the organizers of the event. If organizers of the conference believe that they need any advisory support from the Russian Foreign Ministry, they can contact us. We'll be ready to help. Thank you. So, are we finished? Oh, you forgot about me. Yes, please, Virolk. Well, there is the phrase that the last one will be the first ones. Well, when was the time I asked you first at the briefing, or you believe that you always believe that you are the first journalist who will ask questions at my briefings? Well, surprise me with your questions then. The first question: Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Armenia in Washington, stated at the meeting with the Armenian community that the war in Nagorno-Karabakh helped Armenia to become independent. And many Armenian experts have seen that it was a hint that he hinted at Russia, because by saying so, Armenia has allegedly become independent from Russia. So what's your position on these remarks and these words? I think you should send your questions to the office of Nikol Pashinyan and to him personally to understand what he meant by that, because I don't know what he meant by saying that. Second part of your question on genocide of Armenians. You know, to be true, I never expected then there would be another position to that issue as part of the official position of the Armenian government. I have never thought that this consolidated position that has been formulated for years will be changed, will be revised by the Armenian community. Well, you can hear the statements that have been made recently in Davos, but it's not the questions that should be raised, should be referred to us. Again, our position has been formulated in the statement made by the State Duma that we have been referring to and invoking for years. I don't know. I will express my personal point of view because I tried to fact-check the statements made in Davos. Our position has been formulated and it was changed. Thank you.
And the second question. Recently, one of the leading Azerbaijani TV channels published a report where they accused Russia, which supposedly in 1920 interfered in the territory of Azerbaijan and gave the region Zangezur to Armenia. And that Azerbaijani have not forgotten not only Zangezur, but given to Russia the historical territories of Azerbaijan. But at the end of January, he said that we will not forget it. So what is your opinion? How could you comment on words where both Azerbaijani authorities and the mass media represent historical points of view and prepare it's kind of an information war on this issue? You know, we've written many documents, we've spoken about it with our colleagues, partners, and friends. And the position is that the mass media, in all their freedom of action and with the lack of any censure, as a norm that is being promoted in our capitals, the mass media, considering the pain and the suffering that the people of this region have already experienced, they should act responsibly. They should work towards the peaceful resolution and towards the stabilizing the situation, not towards destabilizing. And I perfectly understand, and sometimes we also get criticized for the fact that Russian mass media are broadcasting or presenting their own point of view or the point of view of the experts who are not shared by one side or another. And we constantly call our mass media to take, when it comes to more sensitive issues that have a potential of a conflicting point of view. And it's not just a hypothetical issue, it's actually a real issue. And once again, I would like to reaffirm our position and our call towards this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. If there are any other questions, please send them over. As you know, during the week we answer to your requests. Wish you all the best. And to all of my colleagues, I wish the upcoming holiday. And I know that my colleagues are already preparing this holiday when it comes to logistics and the information, but we'll have another chance to wish each other happy holiday. All the best and see you next time.